Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, Season 2, Episode 15. Is Cyberpunk 2077 really a problem?
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build.
Welcome back. An actual problem, as always. My name is Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And only slightly problematic, I am Michael Miller.
All right. I have to have a little fun going into this because this is going to be one where it's not a super fun episode, fun-wise. And
What, you don't
but
think
it's something
so?
I think we need to talk about again. I've been hearing lots of people talking about the problematic nature of Cyberpunk 2077, and it's something I think people need to talk about. So let's talk about it.
And we're going to be talking about it specifically, but also how it applies to other fictions as well, guys, because I haven't played Cyberpunk 2077, and I may be in the same camp as a lot of you guys. So Jeff's played it. I haven't.
I have played it, but I'm a very busy person. I've made it out of the first act. So I don't claim to be a master of it. I'm going off of articles people read or people have written about it, complaining about it because it's filling up my feed. I always read that kind of stuff. And I'll get into why as we go through, but I read it with a grain of salt now, to be honest. So, and we'll get more into that here. But part of it, is a discussion about genre too, right? What is the place of genre, and how sterile should fiction be? So, all good questions, all tough questions. So, and I also want to say too, this is not about gameplay or about bugs of the game. To be honest, I have an old PS one. I'm playing it on PS1. Xbox One.
I was about to say, excuse me?
I have a super system that plays everything. No, I have an Xbox One. Lots of bugs in the game. Any kind of role-playing game like that is this aggressive, this ambitious is going to be bugged.
Is the word you might be looking for.
Hopefully I said that word. But yeah. And there are legitimate complaints to make about this game from every angle. So have fun. This is not critiquing you for having an opinion. Okay. But I want to talk about some of them. And first, a lot of the complaints I've heard about every piece of major fiction that's come out in the past couple of years. And not the exact details to it, but, it's transphobic or anti-LGBTQ+. It marginalizes Haitian immigrants, and this one is a specific due to a gang called the Voodoo Boys. I've heard complaints about the depictions of Latinos in it as well too. So poor treatments of marginalized communities in general, and cultural appropriation, especially around the facial tattoos in the game, and a toxic fan base, which any game like this is always accused of having. And a little bit more serious one where the initial loads of it were causing seizures. And I'm sure there are literally probably an infinite number of more complaints that are out there. It's okay to have complaints and to be offended by the game. First thing I want to talk about a little bit is the cyberpunk genre itself and why you should be offended whenever you partake in dystopian fiction. Let's start there.
Well, okay, but what... You're probably going to ask, you're probably about to answer this question, but I was about to say, not by the fact that it exists.
Well, yes, no, you should, because a dystopian fiction by itself is looking at a world that's a dystopian. So if you are going in and looking at it, there should be stuff that is offensive to you. It's dystopian. It's not going to be any type of dystopian fiction, whether or not it's cyberpunk, should offend. That's the point of it. That's why it's dystopian. Like a utopian fiction is supposed to not offend and lure you in until you see the offense. Dystopian fiction on the surface is offensive or meant to be.
I don't know if offensive is always the right word, though. Mm-hmm. Maybe alarming. Like sometimes, because sometimes there's dystopian fictions where it's like, okay, well, this is clearly, immoral or not fair, or there's something really wrong about how the society works.
More of
It's
a personal problem.
not necessarily offensive,
Mhm.
but like you disagree. You know what I mean?
Well, it depends on what you want to call offensive, but I think it's just, dystopian. The idea is
I might be splitting
dystopian
hairs.
fiction. You're splitting hairs there, I
Okay.
think. And
All right. Let's move on.
I mean, my point is, it's supposed to be disagreeable material. Whether or not you want to call it offensive or not, is a personal taste thing. And it's like, also, is it targeted at you? It's like, one of the things that I've talked about with people in political discussions, which this will not turn into one, more so than it needs to, is that I don't want to live in a world where I'm not offended, because if it is unoffensive to me, it by necessity would have to be offensive to someone else, because I have my own likes, tastes, and wants, desires. And where they might overlap greatly with most of society, some people will not like some of the things that I do, and ergo be offended or dislike it, whatever you want to call it. So my point being, just in life in general, there are things that you are going to find as a blemish just because you don't like it. There's a great song by Anthrax called, I think it's This Is Not an Exit. It's off of the Sound of White Noise album. And there's a line in there, one of the things is, what's offensive to you is not offensive to me, and going to the point of, I like the ugly side of life, and if you're a fan of dystopian fiction, it's a cyberpunk like I am, that should be offensive to other people, because by its nature, it is offensive, because I can't argue that it's transphobic or it marginalizes marginal communities, because in a cyberpunk world, and tell me if you disagree with this, Michael, cyberpunk worlds marginalize everyone in the world. They might argue that there's a few tiny people who pull the strings, but ultimately, due to the corporate control of the world, everyone within the world is marginalized, at least from the ground level.
I don't know if marginalized is the right word. I would say that in most cyberpunk fictions, everyone that is not at the extreme top tier is taken advantage of, is pushed down upon. Everyone's a second class citizen, so to speak.
Ergo marginalized. Yes. So thank you for agreeing.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah. And that's kind of the point. And I'd argue that no one in a cyberpunk world, not even a corporate CEO of the biggest company, truly is not used by it. The cogs of the machine, it's like it's the machine versus the world, and the machines have become so powerful that the people have become cogs, and the machines are the world. And the Matrix is probably the height of a cyberpunk world in a way, where the people and there are literally batteries, so that's all they're left to be. And cyberpunk kind of goes anywhere from, you have a few implants that are there to improve you, kind of like our cell phones are today. There's not implanted at this point, but they are technologies that are supposed to be tools that make us more useful. And they do. I get so much more information so much more quickly now on a phone. The problem is they use notifications to train me on how to behave, what to do next. They help make me more reactive in my life, which is one of the actual reasons, and maybe we'll talk about this at some point, why I turn off most notifications on everything. So I actually get almost no notifications, because I don't like being trolled. But that's a different issue. But it's true, though.
Yeah,
it's like everyone is used, and and in a way, it's our world is kind of merging with a cyberpunk world. Corporations are very powerful. Whether or not they're more powerful than governments is always an argument, but in some circumstances, they definitely are. We don't have implants, but we have algorithms that sort of make decisions for us now, and Facebook and Google decide what you're going to see in the news, and beyond them, you have all these influencers out there. You have this influencer and follower mentality in the world, and so you have a few people who make statements that a lot of people hear, and they drive their opinions off of that, then the algorithms feed off of that and determine what you're going to see by how you react. So you get a whole bunch of confirmation bias thrown at you based off of something that you've liked or disliked in one post because you are a follower to someone else's influence. And sometimes it's just a person with an opinion, or other times it's corporations that are making those opinions through people. So it's, in a way, I mean, the interesting thing is the original Cyberpunk I played was 2020, I believe, was the setting, I believe, for where this game itself came out of. It came out for Cyberpunk 2020. And so it's interesting that this kind of came up and became controversial in 2020. And in a lot of ways, a lot of the problems of society might not be quite to the extreme they are in the cyberpunk world. And you don't have the punk backlash, which is sort of the other key element, right? In a cyberpunk genre, you have the punk backlash, supposedly, to try and fight against the system. And we don't really have that in our world. And we might have some activism, but the argument is whether or not it's truly even effective and truly a backlash. It's hard to say.
Would you say that hacktivism falls into that, though?
Sure. Yeah. There are lots of activists out there. The question is, are they doing, stuff to fight against the system, or are they in a way perpetuating the system? And that's a philosophical question, which I don't think we have enough time in our lives to answer. But the truth is, our lives right now are very driven by the information that we see in front of us. And that's very driven by the reactions we have to things online. And even if you don't physically react, how long do you hover over that picture for that clickbait article that you're going to try not to click through? Because they know that as well as if you click through it. And they will give you more pictures like that when you go through. So, I don't think the algorithms are as smart as people think they are either, but they do have massive influence on what we see. One of the reasons I think people say, like, if you spend too much time on Facebook, you become full of anxiety and depressed, literally, because people typically react more to bad news than good news. So sites like Facebook, if they want to keep your attention, keep feeding you bad news with just enough good news to keep you from falling out and leaving, and this is obviously an opinion of mine. But I do think there's some merging of the cyberpunk with our world. It's different. It's social media and algorithms versus these implants that make us less human, which is, I think, one of the big things in cyberpunk. It's like, at what point do you become a machine if you start putting machines into your body? At what point do we become emoji con? How many emojis do you have to give before you become an emoji?
Well, I think the question really comes down to, at what point is it no longer your free will if it is so manipulated that you're choosing things that you never would have chosen without given influence?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
how much influence is no longer influence? How much of it is it control?
And to make this sort of the philosophical side of this, which I think is the important part of this episode, is, and is the fact that I believe that, 10 or 20 years ago was not that way. Is that just an illusion? Maybe it's all deterministic anyway, and I'm just wasting my time. And if I believe I'm making a decision, does it matter if it's deterministic or not? Wow, I'm getting a lot deeper into this than I thought I was going to philosophically, but this is an error of my character. With that, though. And one of the other interesting things too in cyberpunk world, which is very similar to the world today, is this idea of too much white noise. And not really white noise isn't the proper term, but it's distractions, right? It's the notifications. My wife was reading a book. I don't remember the name of the book. I have to try and find out. It said every day as an individual, you make 36,000 decisions. And this comes up, every time your phone does a notification. Every time you read that email that asks you to do something, you're making choices based off of this constant stimulation, which, our Stone Age minds are still Stone Age minds. But, the fact that we can have all of this information benefits us great ways. There are medicines and there's, less and less chance of famine, even with a much larger population because of our ability, to better supply food to more parts of the world, and for more periods of time to overcome droughts and famines. And not perfect. And if you're in a part of the world that's prone to that stuff, you're still having issues, but not as bad as 100 years ago, not as bad as even 10 years ago. But does it matter? I mean, and another thing that, I find very, and this is more of a discussion of the game itself.
I was actually just about to see if we can guide back to the game.
The traffic in Cyberpunk 2077, if you stand out in the road, you will be hit by a car, and it will hit you hard. You will take damage from a car.
Yeah, now, but that's a lot of video games.
It's not realistic, but I'm saying is like they won't try and stop.
But there's a lot of video games that
I understand that, but I'm just pointing out the fact that I think traffic in the real world is starting to go more and more towards that, where you're having issues where I don't know if the traffic's going to stop in 10 years, and it's whether people not paying attention because they're on their phones, self-driving cars or whatever. But, and it's just the way the game is built, and maybe because there's a little bit more traffic and stuff like that. The traffic thing that's happening is completely autonomous to the walking, where right now it's like you have things, you have signals and stuff. So if you're not paying attention, you can get hit. And that does definitely happen in the real world. But I think, maybe it's because of more population and more density creates more of these issues. So, I don't know what the problem is, but the traffic is just downright dangerous in the game. Just be careful crossing the roads. But that's more of an
interesting thing to even mention.
It's just one of the things that caught me that I see as a similarity between this game specifically and their version of Cyberpunk in the world, where there's a lot more urbanism. The country's all dead pretty much, outside of like major cities, kind of like a Judge Dredd kind of world. Mm-hmm. Now, I won't talk about the insurance issues, but that could be a whole other discussion here, talking about the health insurance problems.
Inside the game or inside in our world?
Yes.
Both?
The first mission in the game, the first real mission that any life path will take you through involves medical insurance. And
how timely.
How timely, and it fits very well. But I don't want to spoil it, but trust me, medical insurance is a major part of it. And luckily, some people have good insurance. So, but the other thing is, in cyberpunk worlds, large corporations try and control information to influence people, to segment them. And they've always done this, right? To try and segment people into their audience. So they want to find ways to get you into their audience. And so they create what are literally called segments. And each segment, they try and influence in a different way to get them to consume their product. Large corporations do this with lots of people. Smaller corporations try and carve out their niche, is what it's called in the business world. And then from there, they will try to start segmenting out to get the largest pool. And so, and I think that's exactly, it's maybe to a larger extreme in a cyberpunk world. But in our world, I mean, look at the information battles on TV right now. If you watch the news on CNN versus Fox only, you have a completely different vision of what's happening in the world. And if you go to like the UK and read articles about the US, you're like, how come I don't see this on any station in the US? There will be lots of articles you find in like UK papers that don't even get covered. And some of them are pretty important, And so you sit there and you wonder why these weren't important enough to make our news media. And part of it is right now, the popular technique in media, the best way to gather attention is to have a narrative. So, Fox News was probably the one that started this, when they became very popular, but all of the other news stations have followed. So they all have a story that they're telling, and they find information that's confirmation bias to their story, and that's what gets fed out. And so as a people, depending on whom you choose to deliver your news, correlates to your belief structure. So keep that in mind that, this is a technique in this fictional world, which is even more so powerful, but really you can argue over the last couple of years with disinformation has become, a thing that, everyone says the media is biased against them, but they keep going to the same source for information. And there's a reason why, because they think that's the least bias against them. But now to, kind of got this one in, I don't want to try and claim this game is anywhere close to perfect. And I would agree that you could make the argument they are offensive to people in this game. They sexualize people of more than two genders, in this game. So they treat stereotypically certain types of people, and they culturally appropriate. And I'd argue all those things happen in our world today. And are they wrong to show them happening? And you could say they're trying to, be sensational and try and make more money doing that, which you probably have a fair argument for. But doesn't that lead to the discussions that we need to have today in our society about where we are? And is it better to have those discussions or to sweep them under the carpet and to have those discussions in a way you deem appropriate or someone else deems appropriate? What's the appropriate way?
So if I'm understanding you, the basic gist is that there are segments in the game that are basically replicating real life, seeing the types of cultural appropriation and offensive thought and speech against people of alternate genders.
And of all people,
all people. Okay. So, but the point is that people playing the game are saying, "Hey, this is offensive,"
and because they have people of like transgender people, it would offend. They would go after them too.
But I think what, and I don't want to speak for the makers of the game because I really don't know anything about them. Is it a case where they're delivering things that are occurring in the world because they want to be part of the conversation? They're not trying to say, "Hey, listen, this is how we feel about transgenders," or "This is how we feel about Haitians." We are showing them in a negative light. We understand we're showing them in a negative light, but we're doing that to create a conversation, or we're doing it because what we've done here is we've created a fictional world. This is not a real world that has its opinions on different types of people. And one of the things that I think is really powerful and smart about fiction, this is not a new thing. This goes way, 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 way back. Let's take a look at one of the biggest classics ever, Planet of the Apes. Planet of the Apes was a huge commentary on race relations. And people, if that's lost on you, go rewatch the movie, go read the book. So doing it in a more modern game or more modern media, I feel that one of the things that's a problem with our society these days is people are so sensitive. There's a knee-jerk reaction to things, and that is how we get offended, right? Like something comes at us in a way that is against one of our outlooks, our opinions, maybe a spiritual belief. And we have that knee-jerk reaction because we're like, "Hey, this is different than what I think, feel, or believe." And we don't always go to the next step and try to figure out where it's coming from. And that next step is so powerful. I think that we all need to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, take a moment and not react, but think about where it's coming from and its intention. It's one thing to be out in public and have somebody screaming at you and saying racial slurs. It's another thing to be playing a video game and have a character screaming at you saying racial slurs. Now, I'm not saying that belongs in a video game. I'm not saying it doesn't belong in a video game. What I'm speaking to is our response to it. And I think it is irresponsible of us in all the scenarios where that's going to come at us to not think instead of just react. We see that all too often. And, obviously cancel culture is a huge part of that these days. Everybody makes mistakes. I'm not saying that there's people that I'm not saying everyone that's been canceled shouldn't have been canceled. But what I am saying is there's definitely people that made a mistake, and we're living in a lot less of a forgiving world. But the irony is that a lot of us want a more forgiving world, and it's not perpetuating. You know what I mean? Like if I grew up in the world that we live in now, I'd probably be canceled. I did stupid things when I was a kid. I thank God there were no camera phones when I was younger. So I'm not, oh gosh, I don't want this to come out like victim blaming, because I'm certainly not for that either. But the basic gist is there's a big difference between one person who's genuinely trying to hurt you with their opinion and somebody else who's sharing an opinion, i.e. in a video game, a piece of art that is controversial, that makes you think, that questions your own beliefs, that challenges your thoughts on a given subject, maybe even who you are yourself. That doesn't mean they're trying to hurt you.
Yeah. And sometimes
and that's on us.
And I would say, I want to take what Michael's saying a little bit further, even, is I would say people, we learn from, saying stupid stuff and being wrong and being corrected. And we live in a world where we talk about, we need to have discussions on very sensitive topics. And then if someone wants to discuss it in a way we don't want to hear it, we try and shut down the conversation, whether it's to get people canceled or to cancel the conversation. And ultimately, the problem is you can't improve the way people think if you don't allow the discussions to happen. And you can't always be comfortable in a negative discussion. If you want to determine that these game makers are bad and this game is bad, and you don't want to partake in it, that is awesome. You should absolutely not partake in it. Choose to spend your dollars somewhere that you think is more appropriate. And if it's about the discussion, spend it somewhere else, or maybe go, hey, this does marginalize. What can I do as a human being, to say, hey, this is being somewhat derived from the real world. What can I do as a human being to improve those situations in our world? But the fact is, to tell people not to talk about it, even if it's from a good intention and trying to protect people, will not necessarily make the world any better. It will maybe make it more quiet and seem more pleasant to you when you don't see the problems in the world. And my fear is people don't want to be offended to a point where they are trying to make the world look beautiful. It's that Instagram perfect moment picture that people will spend tens of thousands of dollars to get for their Instagram feed, where it's the perfect picture at the perfect place with the family dressed perfectly, and it's all fake. They might really be there, and they might get in fistfights to make it look perfect, but it's a fake moment on a fake photo with a fake filter, posing as real life and convincing other people that's the way they should look and their family should look when they're on vacation and where they should look. So,
and I want to take a quick step back and drop a big thought on you guys and really hear this, really think about this. But the world of the extraordinary does not exist in your comfort zone. Breakthroughs do not happen when you are comfortable. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable, have difficult conversations, have challenging thoughts about your life and yourself. That stuff is what makes change happen. That's where breakthroughs occur, when you have potential conflict. Now, certainly, I would hope that all the conflicts you guys are getting yourselves into are, discussion based, are where there's mutual respect. I don't want you guys to be putting yourselves in, in dangerous situations. But my point is that some just conversations can be incredibly uncomfortable, but that's where the in for breakthrough and things that are extraordinary exists. That's the in, is discomfort. Like if it's all comfortable, it's not going to be extraordinary.
Michael, why don't you make us up a world building task?
What, are we done with this?
Yeah, that's it, baby.
I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, like I said, we could not cover this in a lifetime. You want to wrap up and then do a world building task?
I mean, I feel like we're just getting into it. Like, how long have we been going?
I have no clue because we don't have the timers up the way we used to.
Yeah, I don't have the timer.
Probably here, about 30 minutes.
All right, I guess that's good enough. But guys, take this conversation to the closed Facebook group. If you're not a part of it yet, you can join our closed Facebook group, www.facebook.com/groups/Undercroft. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you just do a search for Undercroft, you'll find us. A lot of cool people in there. When you join, it's going to ask you 3 questions. The answers to those questions are not terribly important to us. It's really just to weed out bots. But we do ask that you answer them, even if every one of those answers is no or, pie or whatever.
Well, if you tell us you're going to commit spam, you're not going to be allowed in.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, the spam one is. Yeah, we don't want anybody spamming the threads. So yeah, go check that out. You can get access to Jeff and I there if you'd like. As far as a world builder task, I would say consider challenging thoughts in whatever fiction you're working on. I don't think that I think that we should be challenged. I recently listened to one of the shows that I listened to, one of the guys that I follow, and he had said something in regards to people getting canceled. He said, I find it really silly that a lot of people are canceling people just because they disagree, or calling for cancellation just because they disagree with what the person does in their life. Not like one of these ones where someone has done something to hurt another person, or but just because of a person's opinion or the way a person lives their life. And he's like, it doesn't make sense to me that you might only want to consume fiction or art from a person who has the same perspective as you do. And I thought, wow, what a profound idea. Like, isn't the point of art, isn't the point of fiction and however you consume art, whether it is a movie, a video game, a painting on the wall, a book, to expose yourself to thoughts, concepts, and perspectives that you might never have come to by yourself. Like, this is how you're going to learn these new things and see things from a different light. So maybe you should give somebody that offends you a chance, like just to at least see where they're coming from. I'm not saying you have to adopt everything that they believe, but at least to see where they're coming from. That's where understanding grows. You don't have to jump into their camp and do exactly what they're doing.
Have the conversation.
But have the conversation. So for your fiction, I'm saying, don't be afraid to put challenging thoughts in your stuff.
And I'm going to say, for the real world task here, every time you're offended, go out and do a good deed to help address the problem. So if you see a racial injustice, go do something that you think might help in that area. If you see cultural appropriation, do something to help support people in the marginalized culture. Do something positive to counteract a negative that you're seeing in the world. It's okay to be offended. When you don't take action, that's on you, not on the people offending you. You're choosing to be offended instead of taking action. I'm saying take a positive action in the world.
Yeah.
In the opposition of what offended you.
I don't want to throw shade.
Sorry, I just had a laugh there. My son is yelling "O'Toodles" in the background, which is Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. He's supposed to be napping. That caught me off. So
fair enough. I don't want to throw shade at people who do this, but I see a lot of stuff. It's kind of gotten less in recent years, where people will just put up a post that says they're thinking about a thing or sending love out because of a thing occurred or whatever. And I got nothing wrong with people putting out positive thoughts. But if you say like, oh, well, I support our troops, or I support this, or I support that, just saying it doesn't change anything. Do something. I love what you're saying. Jeff's call to action. So if you say, oh, well, I'm pro breast cancer research. Well, okay, great. Send them a check.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Or go volunteer your time. So like, be willing to put action and money where your beliefs are. Because just believing in the thing, that's great, but it doesn't change anything unless you are in the mix. Put yourself in the mix. To quote, what was it, Gandhi? Be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big fan.
And so just go do it. If you know anyone that we should talk to that you think has a good opinion, or opinion that needs to be heard about this, let us know. Well, I don't claim to be an expert on any of these matters.
Neither
I'm
do
just
I.
a human who's largely confused in life, but I like to have discussions when I get confused, which is why I have over 300 episodes where I'm talking, because I'm very confused. All right, everyone, have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.